So you're thinking about starting your own outpatient psychiatric private practice, and now you're having trouble with finding out where you should even start. And honestly, a lot of people have this issue. And unfortunately, there's not as much guidance out there, especially when it comes to psychiatric nurse practitioners wanting to start their own practice. And in this video, I'm going to be going over 5 things that you should consider when trying to start your own private practice. So stay tuned. Welcome back to another episode of Life of a Psych NP. If you are new to this channel, let me formally introduce myself. I'm Darty. I'm a board-certified psychiatric nurse practitioner, and in this channel, I go over several different subjects to educate the public about mental health, ways to improve your lifestyle, topics related to nursing, nurse practitioners, and now starting my own private practice and giving you topics on how to grow your own private practice. So if you are interested in any of these topics, feel free to subscribe. Make sure you give this video a big thumbs up because it helps so much on the algorithm and it helps keep me motivated to making more videos for all of you guys. And if you haven't followed me on Instagram yet, follow me on Instagram at Life of a Psych NP. Welcome to the very first episode of Growing My Private Practice with Darty. So if you are new to this channel or you're new to just me in general, then you probably don't know already, but I am a board certified psychiatric nurse practitioner. I work in so many different settings, but I started working on a new project of opening my own private practice. And if you haven't known already, I probably opened it around March-ish. I was in the talks of wanting to open it sooner, but unfortunately COVID happened and that kind of halted the process. But there's so many different things that I learned along the way, and it kind of helped me, especially with the COVID process, because it made me slow down and actually look at certain things in a different perspective in order to open up my own private practice and doing it slowly. And this is a process that you kind of have to start off slowly and just gather so many different things and put it all down on a piece of paper and just try to figure out yourself. And unfortunately, when starting my own private practice, I did not know where to start. There's so many people out there asking about it, and so many people out there that are actually promoting it, but at the same time, there's no specific one meant for psychiatric nurse practitioners. And it's a little bit different because you have to always consider that as psychiatric nurse practitioners, there's not that many of us, so not that many of us actually successfully started. Yes, there's some people out there, but they're not necessarily promoting on how they did it because obviously competition, and obviously it just depends on the state you live in. And that brings me to certain things, because opening a private practice isn't for everyone. It's not going to be for everyone. There's certain people that enjoy it and some people that don't even want to have the responsibility, because there is a lot of responsibility when it comes to opening up your own private practice. And that's something you have to think about. But in this video, the first episode I wanted to go over is private practice even right for you? And that's what I kind of wanted to discuss today. I wanted to go over certain things that actually will open up your mind on whether or not it's actually right for you. So I came up with a list of 5 questions that you must ask yourself and think about when opening up your own private practice is right for you. So without further ado, let's go over these 5 questions. And before we get started, I just wanted to put it out there. Obviously, these aren't all the questions that you have to ask yourself, but I put together a list of what questions you need to know and ask yourself, what are musts that you have to ask yourself, because this can potentially determine whether or not you're even fit to be able to open up your own private practice. Yes, it's the dream, everyone wants to do it, but sometimes during that period of time in your life, it may not be a fit. And it's something that you have to always think about. So you definitely want to stay until the very end of this video, because I'm going to be going over these 5 questions that may potentially help you or deter you from starting your own private practice. So let's go. So the very first question that you have to ask yourself is, are you in a restricted state or are you in an independent state? So this is a huge thing, because majority of the time when you are in a restricted state, it's a lot harder for you to open up your own practice. You always have to go to your board of registered nursing to see if you can even open your own practice, because there's some states where you can't. and you have to be part of a medical group. And when you are part of that medical corporation, 51% of that medical corporation has to be owned by the physician. And sometimes in different states, you might not even be able to have that nursing corporation open up their own practice. So I definitely would suggest going to your board of registered nursing and seeing if you can actually even do this. But the reason why there's so many restrictions, especially in restricted states, is the fact that you need either a supervising psychiatrist or physician, or you're going to need a collaborative physician or a psychiatrist. And it also depends on your state on whether or not you're allowed to even have a regular physician, meaning internal med or any other specialty besides psych, because there's certain states where you actually need a psychiatrist to be your collaborating or your supervising psychiatrist. So you always have to think about these things. It's a lot harder in these restricted states compared to the independent states, because in independent states, a lot of the times you're just able to open up your own practice and then kind of go about it that way. So you always have to think about whether or not you're in a collaborating state or a restricted state, or if you're going to be in a state that's independent. And obviously this all depends on your state, but for the most part, when you answer this question, then you'll be able to figure out what your next steps are. And in that term, especially if you're in a restricted state, if you have to figure out the next steps is, am I able to get a collaborating or a supervising physician that's going to help me out in this process? So once you kind of narrow that down, then you can kind of move on to the next step. So the second question that you have to ask yourself is, what is your experience like? Do you even have experience in outpatient private practice? So the reason why I say this is because working in outpatient private practice isn't for everyone. A lot of people don't necessarily like the hours. A lot of people don't necessarily like the demand. A lot of people don't necessarily just like that patient population and taking over patients from the very beginning all the way to the very end, depending on when they actually stop mental health services. So you always have to think about that, because not everyone is going to like outpatient private practice. I definitely did make videos in the past. I'll probably link them down below or up here somewhere, explaining why working in private practice is good. But you always have to look at your experience. If you've only had experience in an inpatient setting compared to the outpatient setting, it's a lot different, because the way you treat patients, yes, you're familiar with the medications, but just the style of how you progress or how you titrate up, titrate down on certain medications, it's a lot faster in the inpatient setting, and they're more acute in the inpatient setting compared to the outpatient setting. So you always have to think about what your experience is like, because like I mentioned in the past, not everyone likes outpatient. Some people absolutely hate outpatient. Yes, the thought of opening up your own practice is definitely ideal for a lot of people, but at the same time, even if you wanted to open up your own private practice, are you gonna even love it? So you have to always think about your experience. Think about whether or not you're actually even willing to do it, because there's so many different things about outpatient private practice, especially when it comes to patients' needs, especially when they want certain medications, and just your style of practicing. There's so many different things that you always have to consider. And like I mentioned, some people absolutely love outpatient, and if you love it, then maybe you can move on to the next step and in the process of starting it. But if you absolutely are on the fence or you absolutely hate it, then it might not even be worth it to even open up your own practice, because you don't want to put all this time, you don't want to put all this effort into starting it and then end up hating it and just starting all over again and losing so much money, time, and effort, and then just going back to your regular job. So you always have to think about your experience. And then once you think about the experience, then you can always see if it's geared towards opening up your private practice as opposed to it's geared towards just sticking to your job and going about it that way. So the third question that you have to ask yourself is, what are the needs like in your area? So this is extremely important, because if you are part of a niche group where you have a subspecialty, you're one of very few providers out there, then it might make sense to go for it, because you're going to be one of those people that are serving a specific population. But if you're in general psychiatry, you only see adults from ages 18 up to 60, and you don't necessarily see children, adolescents, you don't see geriatric patients, then you're narrowing down, and a lot of the times providers just want to see patients within that specific population. So the likelihood of you being able to market yourself is going to be a lot harder, and there are going to be a lot more providers in that specific population and working that population. So you always have to think about how many providers are around you, how many practices are around you, and how are you going to be able to make an impact among that population in order for you to attract more patients than all of these providers. But if you're in an area where there's not that many providers, there's not that many practices, then do it. I would say just do it. Because the reason why I say that is because mental health is in need, and more places need more mental health providers. But if you're in an area that's super oversaturated, then it's going to be a lot harder for you. It's going to be more headache for you to be able to market, to be able to attract these patients, especially when you're just working in adult general psychiatry. And I wish this were the case in certain situations, but unfortunately this is the sad reality in certain places. So you always have to think about that, because I know so many people that ventured out into starting their own private practice. They went out in the real world because so many people are saying they need mental health help, but when they go out there, they're not able to attract that many patients, and they have to end up going back to their original job, wasting so much money, wasting so much time, wasting so much effort on so many different things, and the market's not even there for them. So you always have to look at the market around you. Are there a lot of providers? Are there little providers? Do you have subspecialty? Do you have a niche specialty? So you always have to think about that, because in this sense, if you are one of the very few providers in the area, and you know that a lot of your patients are going to be able to follow you, or you know you're going to be able to attract a lot of patients, then it's okay to be like, okay, maybe I'm ready. So this, just kind of check this off and be like, okay, things are looking good for me in order for me to start my own private practice. So the fourth question that you have to ask yourself is, how comfortable are you managing everything? Meaning patient care, admin, marketing, credentialing, all of these things. Obviously, you can outsource a lot of these things, but at the same time, how comfortable are you doing it? Because in the very beginning, a lot of the times, especially if you don't want to spend too much money, you're going to have to do everything. And everything from admin work, meaning your prior authorizations, returning phone calls, making phone calls, and from marketing, actually reaching out to other providers, reaching out to therapists, psychologists, in order for you to get referrals, reaching out to PCPs, making sure you fax over paperwork to insurance companies, doing all of these things. And you also have to do patient care. How comfortable are you with being able to do all of these things? Because if you spend so much time on the admin and marketing, then you're going to have little time to be able to see patients. And when you have little time to see patients, then just the profit margin there is going to be very minimal, especially when you're renting your own office, especially when you're looking at utilities, so many different things that you have to take into consideration. You have to be comfortable with being able to manage all of these things. And if you do hire front desk staff, how comfortable are you with managing the front desk staff, making sure that they're doing everything correctly? So you always have to take these things into consideration, because you don't want to just go out there, get your own practice, pay for rent, pay for a front desk staff, pay for a marketer, pay for a credentialer, all of these things, and spend so much money, and it's not going to work out. So you always have to take these things into consideration, especially when starting your own private practice, because there's so much work that goes into it. The admin work alone, with doing prior authorizations, with calling pharmacies, with going back and forth with other providers, and doing patient load. Like if you already get frustrated and you get anxious just seeing so many patients, then imagine adding on other work, marketing, credentialing, admin work. So you always have to think about these things, because not everyone's set out to want to do all of these things. Some people just might get frustrated just doing the admin work, or some people might just get frustrated just doing patient care. So if you feel that you get anxious, you get easily stressed out from just doing patient care, then it might not make sense for you to go all in and opening your own private practice with having to do everything. And I've come into that experience of having to do the admin work, calling pharmacies. I've never done this before. I'm just so used to having my front desk staff where I worked at to do all of these things, but now I have to do everything. I have to do the disability forms, I have to do the notes, I have to do everything. And sometimes it's more time consuming doing that as opposed to actually seeing the patient in front of me. So you always have to think about that, because at the end of the day, if you don't enjoy this, if you don't like the process, then it might not be worth it. It might just be worth it just to open up your own, or just to open or be part of a private practice under someone else and just work your hours, whatever you need to do, and go about it that way. So you always have to take that into consideration, is how comfortable are you doing everything? I mean everything. So the fifth and final thing that you have to ask yourself is, how is your financial situation? So you always have to think about your financial situation, especially when it comes to starting your own private practice. The reason why I say this is because, like I mentioned in the previous reason, there's so many different things that you have to think about. There's so many different things that have and cost a lot of money. So like I mentioned, if you're going to hire front desk staff, you're thinking about your costs associated with hiring a front desk staff. If you're going to be opening up an actual office, you have to think about the costs associated with the office. You have to think about the costs associated with the EMR, your phone line, internet, fax system. You have to think about all of these things, because you have to put things in place in order for you to run smoothly. When you had your own, when you worked for someone else, you don't think about all of these costs because it's already provided for you, and you just kind of take that percentage split, or you're just getting paid hourly, so you don't have to even think about it. But when you're opening up your own private practice, you have to think about all of these little costs, because it costs people to market, it costs people to run front desk staff or admin, it costs internet, EHR, you're talking about fax, you're talking about all of these little things, HIPAA compliant emails, you're talking about so many different things that are going to end up costing you so much. And going into working or starting your own private practice, I didn't know all of these things. I just had to kind of accumulate all of these costs and just astonished at the amount that it costs. But at the same time, it was worth it for me. But it might not be worth it for other people. They may be in some student loan debt or a lot of student loan debt. They may be in debt somewhere else, or they're just barely scraping by. And if you have to always look at all of these things and take into consideration, because there's so much time, money, effort that you have to put into it. And for some people, it's not even worth the headache, and it's not even worth all of these things, because I know some people that started their own private practice. It might not seem like a lot up front, but as costs and as things start to accumulate, they're looking at it like, it's not even worth it. I'm not even making profit, because they have so many things to consider and take into consideration. Either they're not getting enough patients, they're not getting reimbursed properly, their front office desk staff or whoever's doing their billing isn't doing it appropriately, so you're not getting reimbursed. So there's so many different things you have to think about. I'm kind of just going over the things that are tip of the iceberg when it comes to opening your private practice, and things that you have to actually just realize, because there's so many questions that you have to ask yourself, and there's so many different things that you have to go about doing in order for you to see if private practice is right for you. But I kind of went over these 5 questions, and these 5 questions kind of will start you off. It's going to get your mind going in terms of what you need to look at, because like I mentioned, opening up a private practice isn't for everyone. The idea of opening it up is for everyone, because people love the fact that they get to work for themselves. They get to be their own boss. They get to take all of the profits. They get to do everything on their own, like have their set schedule, have their set hours. And yes, it's beautiful in that aspect, but at the same time, you have to think about all of the other things associated with it. And now that I mentioned these 5 questions, it's going to get you going. It's going to push you in the right direction. It's just going to get the wheels turning in order for you to think about it. And obviously, as I get into this series, I'm going to be going over so many different things, like EHR, which EHR to choose. Are you going to be doing brick and mortar building, or are you going to be doing telepsych, and things to consider that are actually helpful. And I went through all of this process. I had to go through all of this through trial and error, and I had to actually figure it out myself. And I wish there were videos out there that kind of guided me in this situation, but there weren't. But I wanted to put this out there and be able to explain to you all the things that you have to think about, because it may sound good on paper, but when you look at it, do further research, it might not even be worth it. So that's always something to think about. Well guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna try my hardest to be able to put out at least one video about growing my private practice. So this was episode 1, so expect episode 2 next week, and that's when I'm gonna be going over certain other things. And I'm excited, guys. I have a huge list of things that I want to go over, things that I actually had to go through myself, and I wanted to give you the options. Like, for example, one of the videos is going to be how to choose the EHR. So I go over certain other EHR systems or companies of what to choose for, the pros and cons of certain things. So I'm going to be able to explain all of those things, especially like whether or not they can do e-prescribe, whether or not they're able to do it in other states, things like that. So you always have to keep in mind that this is a process for me too. So I'm building my private practice. I'm just trying to give you tips and tricks that'll help you grow instead of going through all the headaches that I had to go through and not make you go through all those stressful moments. I'm here to guide you. I'm here to mentor you, and I'm here to just push you along the way so we can all win together. Well, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it provided with you a lot of information. I hope it got the wheels turning in order for you to think about opening up your own private practice. And as always, guys, make sure you like this video if you haven't already. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.